All right, welcome to my dorm. I'm in my kitchen. Anyway, so we have an upcoming election. I know I am very few in my family that is probably not voting for Donald Trump. And if there's people out there that care, Donald Trump and the Republican Party are not doing good things for people like me. All of you know by now, I'm part of the LGBTQ plus community. It's something I've been afraid of, but that's not really the point. But it also is. While a lot of you will say, oh, Trump's for LGBTQ plus individuals, he said once while holding an upside down flag that he supports us, but during the past 4 years, he's done nothing good for our community. Just a list. I have my laptop right here. Just a list of things he has done. The first one is the opposition to the Equality Act. Basically everyone, despite the support from almost every segment of the U.S. population and even the majority of Republicans, President Trump opposed the Equality Act. In May, the House passed the Equality Act, voting to guarantee critical non-discrimination protections for LGBT people, among other crucial rights. Basically, this is saying that if something happens to an LGBTQ plus individual, they will not be put down as hate crimes, which is a serious issue because right now and this past year and in 2019, it's fine. This past year and currently even this year, we've seen a high rise in the death of Black trans women. And that's basically saying those people who killed her because she's Black and trans will not be put down as hate crimes and won't be charged as hate crimes, which is insanely messed up, insanely not fair, and anyone with common thinking will understand that. The second thing he has done that's definitely hits home is he appointed anti-LGBTQ plus judges. The Supreme Court is the highest court in America, and when you appoint people who don't have the best interest of a big group in this country, it definitely just goes to show where someone stands. He appointed those judges who have had an alarming anti-LGBTQ records to appointments at every level of the judicial system, including anti-equality Supreme Court Justice Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, federal nominees Kaczmarek, Mateer, Bounds, Vitter, Menashe, and others. Now, I know I probably butchered their names, and frankly, I don't care, but yeah. And in 2017, he also joked about Vice President Pence's anti-gay agenda, saying that, don't ask that guy, he wants to hang them all. While everyone wants to piss on Trump, and I do it often, I can't stand him, he's a piece of shit, I honestly, truly believe Pence is 8 times worse than Donald Trump. And they're both shitty. Don't get me wrong. Trump obviously is not a good person. He's a horrible individual. And Pence clearly feels the exact same Trump does. In the workplace, some things he has done, he basically came out and said that he supports discrimination against LGBTQ people in the workplace. Basically, if a company you're working for finds out you're LGBT, he is okay if they fire you because you're LGBT. because you're part of a community, you can be fired. And probably the biggest thing that broke headlines, pisses me off just thinking about it, he banned transgender service members from the military. About 2% of our citizens go and serve in the military, and denying trans individuals to go and serve is just cutting down that anyway, and it's stupid. And it's against the expert advice of military leadership, medical authorities, budget analysis, 70% of Americans and armed forces of allied countries. Trump and Pence banned transgender people from serving in the military. Basically, this is saying literally everyone told him, don't do it, it's kind of dumb, don't cut transgender people out of a chance to serve the country, and he did it anyway. He also rolled back Obama-era non-discrimination protections. So he is just ruining LGBTQ plus rights. He's doing everything he can in his power to make a group that already is heavily stigmatized, there's still a stigma about being LGBT, whether it's being gay, being lesbian, being bi, because there is a lot of biphobia. There's the whole thing with trans individuals. They were lying to me. There's a lot of things in yes, it's gotten better, but there's still things that are going on. Basically, this is saying that he appended previous DOJ interpretations of the Civil Rights Act that protect transgender and non-binary workers from employment discrimination, ceased enforcing non-discrimination protections, as well as taking hostile stance to LGBT workers in court. Basically, that's saying he took away trans rights to go to work and not be discriminated against, and not working in a federal court or state court. So, yeah. Again, another one is issued rule to license discrimination. Trump's Department of Labor issued regulation designed to allow federal contractors to claim a religious exemption to fire LGBT workers because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. Basically saying you can claim to be a religious workforce and company, and if someone comes out as LGBT, you can fire them. So, just ruining people's lives. He kicked out people people living with HIV out of the military because of their status. So if they were HIV positive, the Department of Defense instituted a deploy or get out policy, which removed military personnel living with HIV from service just solely because of their status. Now, this is basically saying, even if you make the criteria of whatever branch you're serving in, and you can pass and go through boot camp, it doesn't matter because of that one thing. Which is just insanely diabolical. It's crude, disgusting, and not to mention all the federal employees that are currently serving under him. He has done nothing but create a hostile work environment for all of those individuals. And going from Obama to Trump, I can't even imagine the very quick change. From a work environment that was safe, you felt protected, you felt like you were actually meant to be there, to going to this new administration, and now it's very clear you're not welcome here anymore. And yeah, not only did he do all of this, But if you know the Section 1557 rule, the HHS published a purpose major change to the administration rule interpreting Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act, ACA, to remove explicit protections for LGBT people in healthcare programs and activities by excluding LGBTQ plus people from protections from discrimination based on sex, stereotyping, and gender identity. To dumb this down, he basically said, we're going to change the Section 1557 rules in the ACA to completely just erase all of those LGBTQ plus protections. He also advocated for the entire elimination of the ACA. The Justice Department issued legal filing arguing that the entirety of the ACA should be overturned. Basically, this would jeopardize over 130 million people with pre-existing conditions such as HIV and eliminate non-discrimination practices and protections for LGBTQ plus people. Created a religious discrimination division. The HHS created a new office whose sole purpose would be to defend physicians and other medical professionals, and I say professionals in quotes for a very real reason, who decide to refuse care for LGBTQ plus patients. I'm sorry, if you're a doctor and you are a medical professional and you refuse to help an LGBTQ plus patient, you're in the wrong damn field. Your sole job is to make sure people are safe and healthy, and so they're not like bleeding internally, they don't have wounds, they aren't sick, they aren't like, that is your job as a doctor, is to protect individuals and keep them healthy. That is why we go to the doctor when you're sick, when you have a broken bone, if you have a ongoing livable that you're living with disease, you go to a doctor for treatment so you can have a sustainable, fulfilling life and you aren't constantly in pain. And this man just took that away by allowing these professionals who are, if you're doing this, you are not a professional. By any means, a professional would put their personal views aside and do what is best for that patient. He also proposed cutting over a $1.35 billion from the PEPFAR budget. In his budget, Trump cut $1.35 billion, or 29% of PEPFAR's budget. If you do not know, PEPFAR is the U.S. government program that fights AIDS abroad. So with the ongoing AIDS issues in other countries. Now, for one that hits close to home, what Trump has done to LGBTQ plus people in schools. Guidance for schools on transgender students. The Department of Education and Justice eliminated Obama-era guidance clarifying that schools must treat transgender students consistent with their gender identity. Basically, this is saying Donald Trump said, no, schools do not have to refer to transgender individuals as their preferred name and pronouns. Basically, creating more pain, sorrow, and torment for trans individuals at school. This also includes school officials to prevent harassment of transgender students, deny access to facilities, bathrooms, consistent with gender identity, or refuse to use correct names and pronouns, all inflicting emotional, untold harm. Basically, this right here is what leads the young kids to kill themselves. This right here is this is harmful. This could get kids to kill themselves. This is horrid. These right here are literally the fine line between a LGBT person surviving and making it and having a successful, fulfilling life and then killing themselves. These are what's stopping LGBT individuals for having those good lives. We have 3 main rights in our Declaration of Independence: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. How the fuck can you pursue happiness under this? How can you have a decent, fulfilling fucking life under rules and laws like this? And it basically goes on to say that it also rejects complaints from transgender students. Basically, if you're a transgender student, you file a civil claim and complaint about the way you were treated, including those who are barred from using bathrooms that correspond with their gender identity, stuff like that. It basically is just making it even harder for LGBT, specifically trans people, to have a voice and combat the harmful practices that are literally happening in schools all around the country. He also, just the icing on top of the cake, suggests it is acceptable for schools to discriminate against LGBTQ plus students while accepting taxpayer funds. Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos was refused to roll out federal funding for schools that discriminate against LGBTQ plus students and has declined to state she would otherwise intervene should discrimination occur. Basically, it's just saying if a school is receiving taxpayer money, so most public schools, they have a right to discriminate against LGBTQ plus individuals. What this means for me at my own former high school, if someone was being discriminatory towards me, I could do nothing. And if they want to, they can just discriminate against me and no one's going to do anything about it. Also, this actually hits to college now. DeVos also rescinded Title IX rules related to schools' obligation to address sexual harassment, including sexual violence, by eliminating the Obama-era rules. DeVos increased the standard of proof from preponderance of the evidence to clear and convincing evidence, making it more difficult for survivors of sexual assault to obtain justice. LGBT people are disproportionately affected by sexual assault and harassment, and the stigma that many LGBTQ plus people face can make it more difficult for survivors to report. Basically, if you get sexually assaulted on your campuses, basically, this is saying DeVos said that you have to have clear and convincing evidence. I'm sorry, but if a woman says he fucking sexually assaulted me or she fucking sexually assaulted me or vice versa or however the scenario plays out, that person that was sexually assaulted needs to have clear and convincing evidence. So basically, if they can find the, old-timey ways of seeing if someone was sexually assaulted, which is ridiculous. He also eliminated language protecting LGBTQ children participating in the 4-H program. The Trump and Pence administration, the current admin, ordered the 4-H programs to remove a policy specifically welcoming LGBTQ plus children to that program, which led to the firing of an official who protested on that. So basically, an official who worked for 4-H, who was completely against this, went out, protested, and was ultimately fired because he saw the hypocrisy of this fucking rule. He used Title IX to discriminate against trans students. The Department of Education claimed that school policies allowing trans youth to participate in sports consistent with their gender identity violated federal law and threatened to withhold funds. Basically, if you're a public school and you allow a trans individual to play on a sports team that matches their gender identity, their fucking gender, they can go and withhold those funds from that school because of that. So basically, there's a lot of trans men out there who, looking at them face value, you wouldn't know if they were trans or not. And you're gonna tell me that you're gonna put that trans man and make him play on like a softball team with all these little ass girls and nothing sketch is gonna happen. You won't completely fucking annihilate every single one of those girls. Especially, like, if this person has been on testosterone at all, their body is now completely different. The way they think, the way they act, the way they compartmentalize, it's all different. You're gonna tell me that a trans woman who's been on hormones should go play on a fucking boys team and she won't get absolutely fucking destroyed? Not only that, but on both sides of this and on both scenarios, they won't get insanely fucking discriminated against. This just keeps going. And let's go up to in housing. Allowed emergency shelters to deny access to transgender and gender non-conforming people. Basically, if a natural disaster happens and everyone has to go to a shelter and a shelter finds out you're a trans individual or gender non-conforming individual, they can deny you from staying in their facility because of that. Place transgender incarcerated persons in the wrong prison. Basically putting trans men in women prisons and trans women in male prisons because, sexual assault won't happen, harassment won't happen. Like, that's exactly what's gonna happen. The Bureau of Prisons rolled back the Obama-era policy that housed transgender prisoners consistent with their gender identity with transgender Basically, this is just saying it's all going to shit. And for families in foster care, the admin that we currently have basically said that when it comes to foster care programs and allowing LGBTQ plus people to adopt, basically, ultimately, they can be like, well, I don't want you to have this kid and give them a bountiful fucking life because you're LGBT. Instead, they'd rather keep kids in our broken foster care system instead of going and putting them with loving, caring, amazing individuals simply because they are LGBT. And because it's also, this, even worse, he refused visas to partners of diplomats. The State Department began refusing visas for same-sex partners of diplomats and UN workers if they are not married. Basically, if I was working for the UN and I was in a different country and I found a fine-ass honey and I fell in love with her and she wanted to come back to the US with me, they would not give her a visa simply because we're an LGBTQ plus relationship. How the fuck is that fair? Also, even worse, change roles to deny surrogate-born children's citizenship. The Trump administration has interpreted immigration rules specifically so the child of same-sex couples born abroad via surrogate would be considered born out of wedlock and making it more difficult for the child to eventually obtain U.S. citizenship. Basically, say a gay couple had a girl maybe in Mexico or whatever who was holding their surrogate child for them and growing that child so that they could have a kid. This would allow and make it insanely difficult for that child to obtain U.S. citizenship. So just being horrible. And just in general, representation in this country. Yes, this video is probably going to be over 30 minutes long. I don't really give a shit. He erased trans people, which Trump's HHS proposed a new definition that would narrowly define sex as either male or female, unchangeable and determined by birth, according to the New York Times. The new definition would essentially eradicate the federal recognition of the estimated 4.4 million transgender Americans, in addition to agency staff, including those at the CDC, have been instructed to stop using the word transgender in official reports. He's trying to eliminate trans people. He's trying to eliminate LGBTQ plus people. He is basically making life for LGBTQ plus Americans as hard as it possibly can be. And this doesn't even include the horrid things that are happening to LGBTQ plus people who are also people of color. Which, if you know anything, it's significantly harder if you are LGBTQ and a person of color. Again, black trans women are literally dropping like flies in this country out of hate crime because this goddamn awful ass man thinks it's acceptable to discriminate and piss on this entire beautiful community. He eliminated information on LGBTQ rights, mentions, and representation on government websites within hours of swearing in. Donald Trump erased pages on LGBT rights that were on the White House website. And basically from all government websites. Basically, again, he's trying to erase LGBTQ plus Americans in this country, and you can't tell me otherwise. He blocked questions regarding sexual orientation from consideration for the census. Basically, during the census, if you haven't taken the census yet, he basically said, we're not going to ask about LGBT or people in... It's just a reflection. In the census whatsoever. Even though, you know, it's insanely important, 1.4. Oh, like, no! Basically, he is, and just overwhelming in just the global setting, he is refusing LGBTQ plus people from asylum seekers fleeing violence. So basically, if you're coming from a war-torn country and you're LGBTQ, this is basically saying the government can refuse you coming here for asylum simply because you're LGBTQ. You're literally trying to escape a country that's war-torn. There's constantly battles. There's constantly whatever. And this is saying you're LGBTQ. You just can't come here. He basically also said that during Pride Month, the embassy should not be flying pride flags. And like that might seem like a little thing, but for a little kid, seeing the embassy fly those flags, and you're young, and you're queer, and everything's scary, and you go to the fucking embassy, and there's a pride flag. There's the trans flag hanging right next to it. That can make you feel so less alone. Because when you're young and you're LGBT you literally feel like you're 1 in a million and you're sick and you're horrid. But those little things, that little ounce of representation that I had growing up, meant the fucking world to me. And this man is erasing that for all of us. This isn't just like a white gay person. Like, no, this is about literally the entire community getting fucked over because people voted for a man who did not have their best interest in mind. This man left the UN Human Rights Council over LGBTQ plus issues. He removed the United States from the UN Human Rights Council. And you say this man loves this community? Are you fucking crazy? In Chechnya, I know I mispronounced that, Trump and Pence refused to condemn attacks on LGBTQ plus people in Chechnya, where atrocities against queer people are horrific and still going on. In Brunei, the Trump-Pence administration has refused to condemn a Brunei law that imposes barbaric punishments for LGBTQ plus people, including death by stoning, torture, and whipping. Basically, this is saying he's allowing other foreign countries to kill LGBTQ plus people for simply being LGBTQ. Not to mention that they're literally torturing them by stoning, torturing. It literally says torturing. So why did I make this video? Well, a lot of people in my life are saying, but Donald Trump loves the LGBTQ plus community. He loves LGBTQ plus. No, he doesn't. At all. At all. He very, very clearly does not enjoy my community. And yeah, I take it personally. And you should too. Because the amount of people in my family that I grew up around who are pro-Trump, someone you love is transgender, someone you love is gay. How about you think? Critical thinking skills, have some, before you go into a poll and select red. Because frankly, we are dying out here. That's not a dramatic thing. No, we are dying in this country under this administration. And if all of those points didn't get something through your head, then you are just please don't ever fucking speak to me again. You guys could tell I was getting choked up by a lot of those because it's fucking ridiculous that it's 2020 and we still have to fight tooth and fucking nail for rights to just have life as we know it. Bye. I have nothing more to say.